This is a merely passable film by any standard. Welcome to SPLAINING, where we'll dish details about a movie, provide a review, and then move into full spoiler territory explaining the whole story, plot, and ending. If you're new to the channel, make sure you click like and subscribe to find your way back. In today's episode, we'll be covering 300: Rise of an Empire, the 2014 action epic written and produced by Zach Snyder of Watchmen and Justice League fame, and directed by Noam Muro, who never really directed anything prior, and it shows. Originally slated to direct, Zach Snyder instead chose to develop and direct the Superman reboot, The Man of Steel. This film is the sequel of sorts to the very successful and well-received 2006 film 300, which Zach Snyder directed himself. This film takes place before, during, and after the main events of the film, and is loosely based on the historical Battle of Artemisium and the Battle of Salamis. It follows another Frank Miller graphic novel, Xerxes, the Fall of the House of Darius and the Rise of Alexander, which surprisingly wasn't published until about 2018. The film was deemed a mild success but considered underperforming, pulling in $338 million US worldwide on a $110 million budget, although critically a dud with about a 45% on Rotten Tomatoes and a Metacritic score in the same range. To be fair, the much superior 300 only received a 61% on Rotten Tomatoes. With no further Frank Miller novels to base it off of, Zach Snyder confirmed the rumor that he had written a film about Alexander the Great called Blood and Ashes that would function as a conclusion to the 300 trilogy. However, as the script developed, it evolved into a love story that didn't quite fit into the third film. The project was eventually rejected by Warner Brothers. Say what you want about Gerard Butler, especially with that basket full of turkeys he's made in the post-300 era, but his role as Leonidas still gives him cred today. Australian actor Sullivan Stapleton, who's starred in a lot of obscure films, does an okay job here as the lead Themistocles. Still, his presence pales in comparison to the larger-than-life gallantry of Butler's performance. Maybe it's unfair to stack them side by side, but Sullivan's performance seems like a cardboard cutout of what a muscly hero is supposed to be, rather than interjecting any sort of personality that would endear you to his character. I mean, with Leonidas, you just felt inspired. Maybe it's his eyeliner, but you definitely made you want to do some push-ups, and women do some other stuff. While the movie starts strong, it loses steam when it moves into these naval battles, which is unfortunate since the film centers around the Aegean theater. This is mainly due to weak dialogue, questionable and rushed tactical logic, and generally strange shots where I can't tell if it's the acting or the directing that leads to spiritless scenes that seem more by the numbers than inspired. This is even true for the film's main baddie, Artemisia, played by Eva Green. Eva does the best with what she's given, with her character starting off strong, but eventually lacking any sort of intimidation or presence needed to carry this role. These types of movies need a mighty rallying cry, and here they're just weak. I get it, it's tough to inspire people.
Spartans! Ready your breakfast and eat hearty. But tonight, we dine in hell!
I mean, how do you follow that up?
Later, we'll have lunch in purgatory.
Additionally, the story doesn't really go anywhere because most of the film is told as a backstory, and by the end, the story is pretty much in the same place as the previous film. While that was okay for 300, as it could have been a standalone film and allows the viewer to infer what happens, like the combined might of the Greek forces eventually defeating Xerxes, here it's more of the same, so the film is essentially a throwaway. I guess we could all just crack a history book, search the internet, for the outcome, but come on, just show us the money shot. Now, I hadn't previously watched this movie because I held 300 in such high regard, and after hearing some of my friends talk about it, I didn't want to violate my fondness of this universe. You know how there's just like some movies that you wish didn't exist because they taint the awesomeness of the original films? Yeah, I'm looking at you, Alien 3, Matrix Reloaded, and Star Wars prequels, amongst others. Now, while this movie doesn't fully violate the sanctity of the first film, it's more like an uncomfortable fondle, enough where you just can't go back in time and things just won't be the same again. It's not a horrible movie. There are interesting moments, such as the destruction of Athens, or pretty much whenever Xerxes, played by Rodrigo Santoro, is on screen. And the action, swordplay, and the combat scenes are all really very entertaining. And I'd say for the first third of this movie is probably the most interesting when you're actually getting to know the characters and their build-up. They just don't live up to the epicness that their backstories imply, and the movie certainly doesn't live up to the epicness that it was bequeathed. All right, with that, let's jump into the story. Here's a heavy spoiler warning, so set your sails and let's get splaining. The story opens with Xerxes surveying the carnage of the Battle of Thermopylae, where King Leonidas and his brave 300 fell to a barrage of arrows after making the god king bleed. It should be all good. Get a few more piercings and rings to close that right up. We see Xerxes holding the decapitated head of Leonidas, yuck, like a macabre beacon over the sacking and destruction of Athens, putting into motion the prophecy of Greece's destruction. We cut to Queen Gorgo of Sparta aboard a ship, recounting to her men the Battle of Marathon, where King Darius of Persia invaded Greece 10 years earlier in an attempt to crush Athens' experimentation with freedom and democracy. This battle provides a little bit of insight into the cycle of violence that led to Xerxes' motivation against Athens. It kicks off a portion of the story set in the past and converges with the early events of the previous film. Outnumbered by the Persian forces 3-1, the Athenian defense is led by a little-known soldier named Themistocles. He stylistically dispatches many a Persian soldier as he advances toward the Persian command ship. Look at that eagle-eye vision. Those ancient carrots must be chock full of vitamin A. They do this a lot, by the way, staring at each other over impossible distances. Using that eagle-eye vision, Themistocles fires an arrow that flies straight and true, despite the raging storm, finding a home in King Darius' chest, much to the anguish of his son, Xerxes. He's actually a pretty good-looking guy in his younger years, although still giving off the impression of an outlet mall cologne salesman. You can just smell the Axe body spray on him. As King Darius lay dying, his greatest naval commander, the dedicated and ferocious Artemisia, joins him by his side. King Darius wishes Xerxes not to repeat his mistakes and leave Greece alone, stating that only the gods can defeat them. Artemisia rips the arrow from his chest and later goes full Lady Macbeth, planting seeds that the king's final words were not a warning, but a challenge. Since only the gods can defeat the Greeks, then Xerxes must be a god king. To kick off this transition, priests, wizards, and mystics from around the empire bless Xerxes and send him on a pilgrimage across the desert. In delirium, Xerxes stumbles across a hermit's cave, which I guess is filled with like evil stuff, and contains an otherworldly pool that baptizes Xerxes, having him emerge over time as the 8-foot-tall, golden, Brazilian-waxed, microbladed BDSM aficionado. You know, because these things happen just sometimes. Artemisia, trusting no one, purged the palace of all of Xerxes' trusted allies, leaving her as the sole advisor and the true puppet master of the Persian army, which is now over 1 million strong. Meanwhile, the Greek council argues about how to handle the oncoming Persian forces, with Themistocles urging to unite and persevere as one nation and provide him with a naval fleet to engage the Persians at sea. He then commits to seeking Sparta's help. This is where the story plays in parallel with the events of the first film. As we see a massive army building near the coasts, Artemisia informs Xerxes that the messenger sent to Sparta has not returned. Yeah, because he was the guy kicked into the giant pit in one of the most badass scenes in history. Themistocles arrives at the gates of Sparta to seek their help and learns that Leonidas has already rejected Xerxes' symbolic offering of earth and water. Oh yeah, and king's skulls, and has marched his force of 300 to the hot gates. Queen Gorgos is reluctant to side with Themistocles, being more concerned with the preservation of Sparta than a united Greece. Aboard Artemisia's command ship, a Greek spy named Silius escapes under a hail of arrows, later reconnecting with Themistocles, discussing the discovery that Artemisia was born Greek and defected to Persia after her family was raped and murdered by Greek hoplites, who were kind of like the local militias. After being taken captive for years as a sex slave, she was eventually left for dead in the streets. She was rescued by a Persian emissary, the same guy who now lies at the bottom of the Spartan pit. Uh-oh. She was clothed and trained by the finest warriors of the Persian Empire. Her unmatched skill, lust for vengeance, and commitment gained the attention of King Darius. Themistocles leads his fleet of 50 warships and several thousand men, including Silius, Silius' son Callisto, and Themistocles' right-hand man Aeschylus, to the Aegean Sea to confront the main Persian fleet, thousands strong, starting the Battle of Artemisium. He provides a rallying speech that's only mildly scintillating, and here is where I think the writers could have stepped it up to create something memorable.
To attack a force of over 1,000 ships with our meager force is suicide.
Such is my plan.
Lame.
There's only one thing to make sure of when the fighting starts.
What's that?
Don't get killed on the first day.
Lame. To combat the superior enemy, the lighter, nimbler Athenian ships outmaneuver and ram the Persian ships in the middle, where they are the weakest, rather than engage them head-on where they are the strongest, splitting many ships in two, then quickly reversing out of there like they run on diesel engines. With many of their ships in ruins, the Persian captains concede that the small circular formation of the Athenian fleet leaves no frontal assault? What? Just ram them from the sides like they did to you. Boomed it. I just solved your problem. Instead, Artemisia retreats while chiding and punishing her captains for their failures, and complimenting the Athenian tactics' creativity. Artemisia is then informed that Themistocles is likely the one who killed King Darius. You didn't say that before, Wouldn't she be pissed? Well, with 125 Persian ships as casualties, the battle goes to the Athenians. Not bad for a day's work. The following day, again facing the enemy head-on, the Athenians feign a retreat into the fog, where the Persians, thinking they have them on the run, advance quickly, hoping not to lose sight of them. As the mist clears, the Persian ships are funneled into a crevice, where several ships crash onto the crags. Yeah, no kidding, Sherlock. This is your best tactician?
Kashani is a fine tactician.
It's a trap!
Too late to stop, the Persian fleet smashes into each other before being charged from the cliffs by the Athenians, suffering more heavy losses. Artemisia surveys her losses from the distance, obviously disappointed as the fleet is decimated and her lieutenant commander dismembered. Impressed with Themistocles' skill, she sends an envoy to invite him to meet her on her ship in neutral waters. She compliments him, pours him wine, and proceeds to try to gain power over him. Then, finding out he's single, bam! Time to get some Greek sword. Sounds like a typical Tinder date, or a prosanima date. That's right, I checked the internets for the translation. Actually, this is all an attempt to seduce him to the Persian side as her second-in-command. He rejects her, after of course giving her the testicles, to which she gets pissed and throws him out. Again, like a typical prosamna date. Oh, the sail of shame. What did I just do?
Well, what have you learned?
Never mix rum and tequila? With a woman scorned, hell takes form as a Persian fleet full of new tricks. They send massive armored oil tankers, coating the water with oil. Oh, this looks bad. You know what's coming. Artemisia sends members of her guard as suicide flame bombers, which the Athenians try to stop in vain with archers. In the skirmish, Celeus is hit by arrows shot from Artemisia's bow. Mass destruction ensues, with oily water set ablaze, one enemy falling into an oil geyser, causing a massive explosion that destroys ships on both sides. Artemisia ignites one of the suicide bombers, destroying Themistocles' command vessel. Then she legit turns and does a slow walk with the explosions behind her. Themistocles is thrown into the water, where he sees monsters of the deep devouring the corpses of his men, turning the Aegean red with blood. He nearly drowns, but is rescued by Aeschylus, and stands by Celeus' side as he perishes from his injuries. With things at an all-time low, the scene cuts back to the aftermath of the Battle of Thermopylae. With Leonidas and the 300 defeated, Xerxes marches his army past the corpses as an example of the consequences for challenging the god king. Daxos, the Arcadian general who fought alongside Leonidas, informs Themistocles of the defeat. Themistocles sets out for Athens to deliver the message personally and confront the traitor Ephialtes, who has carried Leonidas' sword to the council in Athens, forewarning Xerxes' coming. He reiterates that the Spartan sacrifice was a beautiful victory, and for Greece to unite against the common enemy. Geez, how many times do I have to tell ya? Ephialtes acknowledges and regrets his betrayal shamefully. Themistocles spares him to carry the challenge to Xerxes to beat and finish the war at the Bay of Salamis. Themistocles returns to Sparta and offers condolences to a mourning Queen Gorgo. He again requests the assistance of Sparta, to which Gorgo at first angrily denies for the high price that a united Greece has cost her and her people. Before departing, Themistocles returns Leonidas' sword to her and urges her to avenge him. Jeez, this guy is like pulling all the manipulations, Des Husband styles. We return to the destruction of Athens, the oracle's warning of Greece's impending doom playing out again. However, this time with a glimpse of hope that a tidal wave of heroes' blood can save them. With Xerxes and Artemisia presiding over the victory in Athens, Ephialtes arrives to deliver Themistocles' message. Upon learning he is alive, Artemisia leaves to ready her entire navy for battle. Xerxes suggests it most likely is a trap, to which Artemisia goadingly replies that all of Xerxes' victories have served to inspire a Greek response. He strikes her, to which she angrily reminds him that she made him king through her efforts before leaving for battle. In the evening before the battle, we discover the meager state of the Athenian fleet, with only a handful of men and ships surviving the Battle of Artemisium. The remaining men fear that without the Spartans, defeat is inevitable and blame Themistocles for losing their chance to negotiate with the Persians. Themistocles gives his worst inspirational speech yet, admitting that he played a dangerous game and lost, and everyone is free to go, except kind of guilting them that they would be turning their back on their country. He does use this trite idiom that he'd rather die on his feet than live on his knees. Well, I'm inspired. How about you? Well, yes. Good, I guess.
Let's go!
Oh, wait. 1,
2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
ships? I guess it's not a trap. Whew. Yay, dying on our feet. Oh, hey guys, what are you doing there? This is like cultural appropriation. Is it racist? I don't know anymore. I don't know which way is up or down. But I guess this is ancient Greece, so I guess it's okay. Just don't post that stuff on Twitter, because that shit will haunt you forever. Can you say cancel, bro? With more long-distance stink eyes, the remaining Greek ships charge into the Persian ships, and the two armies battle in close quarters, beginning the decisive Battle of Salamis. Artemisia leads her soldiers into battle with some sweet dual golden blades, finally showing off her renowned sword skills. Her immortal guards at her flank make short work of the Athenian troops. Themistocles uncovers horses that he just happened to bring into battle, and he rides it into the charge, taking out many a Persian and immortal in a fairly obvious CGI-rendered scene. He spies Artemisia and rides through fire and water before quickly dispatching her immortal guards. The two engage in an endgame duel. With Artemisia first getting the upper hand and slicing his thigh before coming to a stalemate with swords at each other's throats. This is where the story comes full circle to the beginning of the film. A gentle breeze can be felt during the impasse, which can only be described as the echo of freedom. Thus far, Queen Gorgo, who has been narrating the film, crests the horizon with an armada of warships from a united Greece, including city-states Delphi, Thebes, Olympia, Arcadia, and Sparta. Surrounded, Artemisia is caught off guard, and Themistocles urges her to surrender. Xerxes, observing from the cliffside, turns his back on Artemisia, acknowledging the naval defeat and continuing the march of his army. Defeated, rather than submit and surrender, Artemisia attempts to kill Themistocles one last time, but is stabbed through the stomach. She falls to her knees, staying alive only long enough to see the arrival of the Spartan army, before slumping over lifeless. With Queen Gorgo leading the Greek assault, Themistocles, Gorgo, and Dilios silently acknowledge one another's alliance as the three charge forward with the whole Greek army. Well, that's where the story leaves off. You heard me right. It will be interesting to see if the series gets a proper sequel, even if it's a streaming release. Okay, 300, Rise of an Empire. Have you seen it? What did you think? Have I been too harsh on it? It's right on the border for me, so go ahead and let me know in the comments below. Thank you all for stopping in, and as always, if you like what you see, go ahead and click me down there, because we got some splaining to do.